Hi everyone, welcome to season 2 of the Cup of Trio podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, just a quick note, this is part 1 of a 2-episode series focused on highlighting women in STEM. There was so much incredible insight and information that we decided to split it into 2 parts just so we didn't have to leave out any of the good stuff. So be sure to tune in for part 2 as well. With that said, let's go ahead and get right on to the episode.
Welcome everyone to the Cup of Trio podcast. I am Sherry Brown, Program Manager for the Prime STEM program here at UCF, and with us we have our co-host.
Hello everyone, my name is Claudia, the Admin Assistant for Prime STEM and Project Best. Today we have a guest with us. We have Kadi. Hello, Kadi.
Hi everyone, my name is Kadi Gashlin. I am a UCF alum, also Prime STEM alum. I graduated in 2019, majoring in aerospace engineering, where I then shortly after moved over to Houston, Texas, where I'm still at. I was at NASA for about 2.5 years, and then I've been at Axiom Space since.
Nice. So I saw that in your bio, you said that you're an environmentalist systems design engineer.
Yeah. So what I do now is, so my previous job was more focused on operations for environmental systems. So that is actually, knowing how the systems that already exist operate. And what I currently do is more on the traditional engineering side, so actually making these systems. So when I started here, I was a design engineer for the urine processor subassembly. So that's basically taking astronaut urine and turning it into drinking water. It's like the first step in a couple-step process of doing that. So did that for a bit, and then they needed help with something else. So then I moved over to working on the toilet. Then they needed help with something else. I moved over to water distribution lines. So that's kind of like space plumbing, water lines. And now I'm working on heat rejection for the station. So a little bit of a jack of trades in the environmental system, but yeah, it's really cool being more on the design side versus operator side.
Wow, yeah, I bet. Nice. Do you have any questions, Sherry?
Sure. Tell us a little bit about your journey from UCF to where you are now.
Yeah. So just kind of in general, I was at I'm trying to think. So for journey, just like graduating, because I just kind of said how I was at NASA for 2.5 years and then here, so I'm not really sure what else.
So I would say kind of like what sparked your interest in STEM initially to kind of get you where you are today, your experiences at UCF, in your program here, your engineering program. And then I know you did some internship opportunities when you were at UCF, and then what kind of led you to your first job outside once you graduated?
Okay, cool. Okay.
And one
Well,
more thing, sorry. Also, like some involvement you have, so that'll just kind of help our students, especially our women students that are in STEM and engineering, so they kind of see, oh, this is our things that she did, so maybe this is something that I should, be involved in as well.
okay, cool. Okay, well, I was actually going to be an art major for a very long time. All throughout high school, that's what I wanted to do. And I actually applied to art schools, and I applied to UCF as an art major. And I was actually accepted as an art major. And then the summer before actually joining UCF, I switched it to aerospace engineering, which I know is a big switch. But in high school, I was really interested in art, and I still do art, different kinds of art than I did, but I still you do it as a hobby. But I was always interested in science. Science was my favorite class, and I was in high school. So it's called SECME. It's Science, Engineering, Communication, and Mathematical Enhancement. And so I was involved in that, and we made rockets, mousetraps, gliders, that kind of thing. And part of me was always like, I really like this stuff, but I can't do science. It's too hard, stuff like that. And then through SECME, my rocket won the regional competition, and then my teacher actually submitted the scores to the national competition without telling me, just, in case it didn't go anywhere. I don't think he was going to tell me. But it actually won first place at the national competition. So that kind of like sparked some confidence in me of, oh, I can do stuff like this. Let me see kind of where it goes. So I switched over to aerospace engineering. And overall, I think, UCF has a really good engineering program. Some of the classes are really hard. I specifically had trouble with Calc 2. That was really hard for me. And then thermodynamics was also really hard. But that's actually part of how I came to Trio is I had someone in my family pass away, and I was really struggling through that grief trying to manage my classes at the same time. And my Calc 2 class was really taking the hit on it, and I could not figure it out. Every time I opened the book, I was just getting too overwhelmed. And I went to my teacher, and he was being really good. He would give me extensions and everything. And then one day he was like, hey, maybe you should take a medical leave of absence to kind of like figure things out before you come back. And I was like, well, I personally don't think I'm going to come back if I do something like that. So that's not an option for me. So I went to my first year advisor, and she actually recommended I just drop out of college in general. And I was like, oh, I don't think I should do that.
Wow.
Yeah, so, and like my other class grades were fine. She was, coming from the perspective of, oh, you should take some time for yourself, drop out and try coming back in like a year or two. And I was like, I also will not come back in a year or two. So, um, someone else in the office, I don't remember who, knew kind of what was going on. And I think she used to work for Trio. She said, oh, do you meet any of these qualifications? And I'm a first generation student, so I did. So she took me over. Two guys I interviewed, and I got accepted into the program. So Trio, I'm not just trying to suck up. Trio was very big for me in college, having that study space. And you guys at the time, I don't know if you still do, had a tutor for Calc 2. So I did drop the class the first time, but I did it again in the summer and I passed. So and yeah, Trio was really good. And I was involved in a good amount of other stuff in college. My sophomore year, I joined the Gamma Phi Beta Panhellenic sorority, so pretty involved in that. And then my junior year, I joined Tau Beta Pi, the Engineering Honor Society. I was in other things, but these were probably the two biggest ones that I was in. And then after a little bit of time, I became the STEM outreach coordinator for Tau Beta Pi. So I was always interested in STEM education because I had done a couple little volunteering things here and there before then, but I was able to really cement kind of my passion for STEM education and get to work with it more. So I really love doing stuff like this. And kind of since then, I've done, Q&As, presentations, mentored others. I've judged a lot of science fair projects, which is always pretty fun. Let's see, what else? Oh, in college, I, for a little bit, was a TA for Intro to Engineering. So that kind of included running my own lab sessions, teaching things like Excel, AutoCAD, MATLAB a little bit. MATLAB was never my strong suit, but so I did that for a while, and then I got my first internship, which was with an electrical engineering company that shall not be named because there was some issues with them, but not my issues. And later on, I was an intern for Northrop Grumman. which was really exciting for me because at the time I really wanted to go into the defense industry. I had that one. It was the summer between my junior and senior year of college. Um, I really enjoyed the TA job. It it taught me a lot on how to present in front of people and talk to a bunch of people, and kind of helped with my shyness with that because I would have to talk to multiple times a day groups of 30, 40 kids. Um, I say kids, I was only 3 years older than them, so it feels weird saying that. But but yeah, and I got a job at Northrop Grumman after the internship, but then there was a career fair at UCF, and I went to it, and I see they had a poster with an astronaut on it, and it said KBR, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. Let me talk to them. I'm not super interested in space, but there's no one in line right now. So I talked to them, and they said, "Do you know what we are?" And I said, "No, I never heard of you guys." And they said, "Oh, we actually, are the main supplier for NASA Johnson Space Center, for mission control." And I was like, "Oh, you're Houston, we have a problem." And he said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, no way. I didn't know that was something you could just apply for." Like, it makes sense. It's a job you can apply for. But in my mind, they pulled from people they already had, like other engineers or something. Um, so we were talking. He was actually also a TA for intro to engineering at his school back in the day. So, we started talking about that. Um, I did a very lengthy interview process with them. Um, got the job, and it's crazy because I was, about 4 years, I'm gonna do defense, defense, defense. And then within 1 month, I was like, okay, just kidding, I'm gonna do space. Um, at the time, it was, the defense industry, I think is always going to be there, and I could always go back to it versus, mission control is kind of more of a once in a lifetime kind of job. Um, so moved out to Houston about, a month-ish later, and we were there for about 2-ish months, and then COVID hit, and we were telework for 2 years.
Well, that's a
So
long time.
most of my experience at NASA was telework, which who knows, maybe if it wasn't, I would have still been there. But yeah, it's really hard to do the training yourself at home, and no one was prepared for what was coming, so it was kind of hard for them to transition all the lessons and stuff to telework and everything. Um, but I kind of just found that I wasn't super passionate about, the operations. And I thought the equipment was really cool, like, all the Eclipse stuff and how it worked together. I really enjoyed. I just didn't want to sit at the computer, operating. Um, and I felt really conflicted about leaving because when you tell people, "Oh, I work in mission control," they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
So cool.
Like,
Yeah.
you made it. That's the big job." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it's not for me." So I had to kind of come to terms of like, how do I word this?
We do have a question about imposter syndrome. Did you experience that?
Yeah. I experienced a lot of imposter syndrome. Actually, someone at NASA gave a presentation because there was such like a high amount of imposter syndrome there.
Wow.
Because I feel like a lot of people in these kinds of jobs are type A, and I think type A usually gets a lot of imposter syndrome. Especially if you kind of grow up as an overachiever, or if I felt if I got anything less than like an A, I was like, oh, I failed or something. So, you have this notion that you need to achieve the highest thing you can all the time, or else is it even worth doing?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there was definitely a lot of imposter syndrome, and I still have it to this day. And my husband gets kind of annoyed. So I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I had this idea at work, but it's kind of dumb. It's really simple. It's not like this big thing someone else has done." And he was like, "Did they like it?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, but it's really simple." And he was like, "Then it's good. Stop." So yeah, it's a constant battle. Like, yeah, be confident in yourself, but oh, am I too confident? Stuff like that. But I feel like, it gets better over time the more experience you have. So, yeah, definitely have had imposter syndrome.
I was going to say, representation matters. And of course, since we're highlighting women in STEM, can you kind of speak about what it means to be a woman in STEM and maybe any gender biases or stereotypes you may have faced?
Yeah, being a woman in STEM, it kind of depends on your field too. Like I feel like where I'm at in the space industry, it's not as biased as say the defense industry or oil and gas, where it's more of a boys' club. At least in my experience, I feel like there's a higher percentage of women in the space industry than like oil and gas or the defense industry. But you still have bias. I don't know if anyone where I currently work have those, I guess, I don't know, bias towards women, but I have definitely experienced, comments that they wouldn't make to a man because I'm a woman. I don't know.
It's really cool that you say that there are more women in the space industry because honestly, I don't know much about the space industry, and I just assumed that that would also be something where a lot of guys would be. So that's really interesting to
Yeah,
hear.
I mean, there's definitely still a lot more men at my job than women, but so at NASA and Axiom in my environmental groups, I feel like it's almost 50-50 overall, which is really cool. But there are other groups where it is all men. There's a group here where I think they only have two girls on the team out of like 12 people. There was a group at NASA where I actually knew of two girls who left to a different group because they said it was too much of a boys' club. So I guess it just more so depends on where in space you are, but there are definitely spaces where it is more equal, and I'm lucky that I have fallen into more of those spaces.
Nice, very cool. And you mentioned, was it your husband? Is
Mhm.
a very big support system
Oh,
for
for sure.
you?
Yeah. Yeah. We actually met at NASA and we got married in November of last year.
Oh,
Um,
congrats.
Congrats.
thank you. Um, Yeah, it was really funny because so at NASA there's something called boot camp, which is like NASA 101 for a few weeks. And they say, oh, there's always one couple that gets married from boot camp. And I joked with my group, it's gonna be me. And then it was. Um,
That's cute.
but yeah, he still works at NASA, doing mission control for a different group than I was in. But yeah, he's a huge support system. My friends also are very big support systems, whenever I need to rant. But my husband is really great. I'm gonna send him this link so he hears me hype in a minute. But
Shout out to the
Go
husband.
husband. Yeah.
but instead of just letting me vent, which sometimes that's all I want. And it's nice, but he will be like, I think you're thinking of this the wrong way. I think you're letting your self-esteem get to it. Are they really saying that you're a bad employee? And I'm like, well, no, they didn't say those words. And he's like, stop it. Think about it this way. I'm like, huh, you're right. So he kind of helps calm me down from getting in that kind of imposter syndrome headspace, and having me kind of reflect back. May take me a day or two to be like, fine, you were right. But
Oh,
but
that's so
yeah, I
cool.
think having a support system is definitely really great. I think as a woman in STEM, I definitely needed a support system. I have a mentor at work that, I specifically asked for, oh, can I have a woman be my mentor? And her and I kind of talk about this kind of stuff too. So it's just nice having someone else who has had similar experiences to be able to talk to about things.
All right, and that wraps up part 1 of this episode. We hope you enjoyed it just as much as we did. Be sure to catch us in part 2. It should be posted by the end of this month, which is the end of April. And with that said, thanks for listening.